I'm scared.
Welcome to Wisdom Speaks, where the profound meets the practical. In a world filled with noise and distraction, it's easy to lose our way. But what if we embrace the wisdom as our guiding light? Imagine a life where every decision is infused with insight, where challenges become opportunities for growth, and where clarity replaces confusion. Join us as we explore the transformative power of wisdom, how it can reshape our minds, enrich our lives, and lead us toward a brighter, more fulfilling future. Together, we'll uncover the timeless truths that inspire us to live with purpose and intention. Welcome to Wisdom Speaks. Let the journey begin.
Welcome to Wisdom Speaks, where the profound definitely meets the practical and it's real and raw every chance we get to get before you all on Wednesdays. I am your host, Tasha Smith, and on today, we will be touching on from tragedy to triumphs. Oftentimes in life, we go through different things, whether it be death in the family, whether it be divorce, whether it be a broken relationship from a friend, whatever the case may be. Oftentimes, those tragedies can take us down a road that we never imagined that we would be on. And so today, we definitely will be talking about the tragedies of life, but we'll be focusing on the triumphs. So please, please, please stay with us today. Join us as we introduce a phenomenal guest that we have today, that her life is a living testimony of what tragedy can do to a person if you focus on the triumphs. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you all. This is a mother, a grandmother, a woman that's multifaceted in entrepreneurship. She's a business owner. She's a venue owner. She's a motivational speaker, creative design decorator. She has so much going on. Just to listen to her resume is inspiring in itself, especially when you hear the stories of the tragedies and look at her and listen to her now, and the triumphs overpowers any of the tragedies. Although there's still tragedies, it overpowers it. So I want to welcome to the Wisdom Speaks platform, Miss Valisha Wilson. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank
That's
you.
good. That's good. So speaking of tragedies, like I said, a lot of times, people don't know how to get over a tragedy. Especially if you like we are, we're more in that realm of the spirit. And so we don't, we know to go to God, but then it stops there. Most of the time we don't really try to figure out how, like, what's another method that we can take to get over the tragedy. So we'll just start right there and just talk about if you have a story that you would like to share of a tragedy, and then we'll talk about that personal journey for you, how it affected you in a way.
I think the most uh, effective way that I overcame or that I'm still overcoming tragedy, I think I can speak to the loss of my mom. And as mentioned, of course, our foundation is based on ministry, so we've always tapped into the spiritual aspect. So for me, I had to unlearn a lot of familiarity.
Yes.
And it was very hard to do because when you have to unlearn what's been ingrained in you, then you start to feel like you're going against the grain.
That's good.
But for me, I had to do something different because I almost lost myself in the midst of loss. So it was, like I said, having to unlearn a lot of things, a lot of, keeping the foundational principles. But it's almost, I guess, if you want to kind of go to the spiritual aspect of it, it's almost going more towards what has been revealed versus what's been taught.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yes.
what has been revealed versus what has been taught.
Yes.
And let's just touch on that for a minute. I want to piggyback off of that because a lot of times, you know, especially growing up in the era where we grow up, and not knocking anything, we are women of God. I love God. I trust God. I'm going to go to God first for everything. But at the same time, when that's all you go through, you know, that's all you go to is God. Like you don't seek help outside of that. You don't do research on how can I get over this. And sometimes we have to get into that mental place where this is a major loss.
Mhm.
God is going to strengthen me regardless, but this is a major loss. So now I have to figure out another way because me fasting, me praying, I still haven't got over. You know, you'll never get over it, but
Right.
you hadn't reached that point where you can kind of breathe without driving yourself crazy. You know, and so we'll talk about the turning point for you. Even in the midst, you say you lost your mom. I knew it. I know it had to be devastating. It, you know, to lose
Right.
anybody,
Mhm.
but a mother, especially when she's impactful in your life. So, you know, if you can just talk about that and just tell the viewers, like, what was the turning point for you? And how were you able to cope at a level of mentality?
So for me, when I had to get away from trying to over spiritualize the loss, because based on how I was raised, we were always taught to, you know, go to God in prayer. And I had to just come to the realization that grief is not really a spirit, it's a reality.
Mm.
So I found myself trying to rebuke trauma. You know, it was a very devastating loss. So for me, I had to really dig deep within myself and say, hey, this is where your humanity meets your divinity. Because even though you are a spiritual being, you have lost somebody in the physical realm.
Mm.
So I had to learn how to cope with what I was going through in the earth.
Mhm.
Because it was like, okay, we know that you can go to God in prayer and we know that you can intercede and, you know, consecrate yourself. But the reality of it was I was spiraling. I was going into severe depression. There were times where I literally thought I was going to lose my mind because grief, it alters your mind. It changes everything about the way you perceive things, your perception of life. So for me, when I literally felt like my back was against the wall, I knew then it's time to do something different.
Mhm.
Because at that point, I said, if I don't do something different, I'm going to die in faith. I mean, that's really deep. And so I had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, I believe God, but I don't want to lose my fight with life because I believe God. And I don't believe in addressing the chemical imbalance that has been caused from the grief. So for me, the turning point was when I didn't have a plan B for the grief. Because me being the type of person I am, I've always been able to overcome things.
Yes.
I've always been able to go through the worst of the worst and overcome it. But when I lost my mom, that was the one thing that I did not have a solution for. So for me, I knew that if you don't get some professional help along with the prayer, you're not going to be here.
Absolutely.
And so that was the turning point for me because I was literally losing myself. I was, my personality has always afforded me the opportunity to, walk in rooms and not look what I'm going through. But there was the one time where I literally felt myself just losing the battle with life. And that's when I said, okay, it's time to get some professional help. And it's time to be real with myself.
Absolutely.
Yes, and that's what I did. I ended up getting a therapist. But I will tell, everybody this, why therapy works. It doesn't necessarily work for you, it works with you.
Yes.
It works with you. So at the same time, although I had a therapist, I had to become extremely vulnerable. I've always been a private person, even though this lady knew nothing about me. But I had to be honest with myself about different childhood traumas and things like that. So even though I was addressing the loss of my mom, therapy makes everything come out.
And it does.
And so that was one of the ways that I started to, initiate my journey of healing, of coping, because you never put a heal for free. So that was one of my things.
Wow. That was so powerful. I hope you all are listening with so many different nuggets that was said, but we hadn't even got to the grit of things because that is a true fact. A lot of times that's what we do. And it's almost like the traditional mindset and the traditional thinking, that's the last thing for us to do.
Yes.
Is to seek help. It's the last thing to do. It was almost as if growing up it was a don't, like we always had this saying, what goes on in this house stays in this house.
Right.
Don't share too much information with outside people. But like you said, when a tragedy like that hit, and that, it was so powerful when you said, you didn't want to die in faith. That was so powerful.
Yes.
And if you can just kind of expound on that just a bit, like we just break it down for the viewers, because there's so many people are trying to keep faith, and nothing is wrong with keeping faith. It's an absolute mandatory that we have in life. But to just to expound on that, you didn't want to die in faith.
So for me, I understand that, of course, my foundation, my family, my mom, she was a woman of faith, and that was put in us. However, there were times where I had to draw a line and say, okay, this is faith, this is reality, but this is wisdom. So for me, I learned how to incorporate all three of them in order to survive, because I realized if I only do one of these, something is going to go less. And I don't want my life to be on the line based on me just utilizing one of these things. So I had to learn how to pray. I had to learn how to get professional help while I was praying. And the wisdom in that was to bring the two together. Because, like I said, we are spiritual beings, but at the same time, we're operating in the earth.
Yes.
So we have to have coping mechanisms to help us to navigate through life here. And so that was the thing for me, because there were times where I was suicidal, and for me, that was the turning point for me, because I had never dealt with it. I always thought it was a choice or it was a spirit, but grief, it alters everything. It alters everything about your life. It takes you to the lowest of the low, because you're trying to navigate through, my person is gone forever. Even with your highest accomplishments, you still feel the highest feeling of void that you feel. So, life doesn't even feel real anymore. It almost feels like you're in the twilight zone.
Absolutely.
You're literally existing. You're not living, you're just here. And so there were times where I was down to my lowest. I was praying, I was worshiping, I had worship music on, I was still suicidal. I was going to church, I was fasting, and I was still suicidal. At that point, I said, okay, I don't want my kids, I don't want my family to say that I was an amazing person. And, she did all of this, but she lost her battle with grief. But she was a woman of faith.
Yes.
Because at that point, the underlying issue is still being covered up.
It is.
So it's like, I'm a woman of faith, but the mental health was never addressed. And so that's usually what happens. You go through that, and people, they focus, she was a woman of God, but no one addresses the underlying issue. And so people shout over it. And then the underlying issue is still there. It's still there.
And even, that underlying issue, like you said, is still there. So when everybody is gone, when there's just, now you have no choice except for to deal with that. All the accolades and all the I'm here for yous and all of those things are good. But when you're gone and it's just me left there with that reality, it can get it will put you in a sunken place.
It will put you in a sunken place. And the thing about it is, although I come from a family of very powerful, anointed men and women of God, I had to realize in that moment it wasn't their fault. But here's the thing. We were only taught about things of the spirit. But I realized a lot of them could not help me because they lacked the emotional intelligence to deal with the trauma that I was dealing with. So where I was needing a hug or nurturing or, just someone to be completely vulnerable with, it was just like, I'm gonna pray you don't lose your mind. But I'm like, okay, my mind almost just about gone. So what we doing now? Like,
it's gone.
Because I'm like, okay, you praying and I'm getting in the line. I'm almost out of here. And the thing about it too is sometimes I would be like, okay, all of these prophecies and things like that, no one can see I'm drowning. But that's when I had to realize it wasn't for them to see because there was a level that I had to tap into in order to help other people beyond the spiritual aspect. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where it comes in with, like you said, about that wisdom, just using wisdom to know, what to kind of deal with yourself, what to kind of deal with the therapist and what to give to God.
Yes.
Because like you said, you need all three to be able to function. I lost my dad. It was 2 years, in this year in February. And like I tell a lot of people, my family had a different kind of relationship. We had a different bond, and my dad was actually our friend. He was a friend, so all of the children knew that was a privilege for us.
Absolutely.
It was a privilege because his job is just a parent.
Right.
And so to have that friend, and then that friend is, your life, you're grown, you're having children, and then that friend, which is that father, is still there.
Right.
But I experienced the same thing where it was like, okay, naturally, I know to pray. So at some point, you literally, just in a transparent moment, you trust God, but you get tired of hearing that. I literally got tired of hearing just pray and ask God for strength. No, I have strength for a lot of things, but I am weak when it comes to losing my father. So I don't even want to pray and ask God for strength. What I'm praying for is, God, how do I get over? How do I get over? Not get over the death, but get over this episode, this season of my life where I can function and still be good in the earth.
Exactly.
And so that's where I found myself at. And like you said, my mindset had to shift. And I began to, of course, I sought therapy from my apostle, I did that. And I just thank God for her being there, because as an apostle, she was still, it was still practical moments where she, let's let down for a minute.
And it's needed.
And let's talk the real.
Yes.
We know we're women of God, but let's talk the real.
Right.
How do you feel? I was mad. I was angry. I was upset. I was almost in a selfish state because I'm like, why couldn't you just, God, you could have healed him and left him here. You be in those moments. And the only thing that got me out of that was focusing on everything that my dad said he wished I was doing. He wished he could see me do. Although he wasn't here anymore, I had to focus on, okay, I can still do it.
I can still do it.
I can still do this. So I'm going for everything that me and my dad talked about. And although he's not here to see it, I know he's with the Lord. So the manifestation of what he wanted is still being,
because that's a coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
So when you pay tribute and honor their legacy, it's a coping mechanism. And the thing about grief, you either die in it or you live through it. It's no in between. It is no in between.
Again, for the people, that was
with grief, you either die in grief or you live through it. There is no in between. And the thing about it is you have to keep pushing, because if you don't keep pushing, you'll lose your mind. Grief will make you lose your mind because you can't understand it. You can't unlock it no matter how analytical, how logical you are. Grief is something that you can't understand. And what I had to understand about grief, going over into the spiritual realm from the earthly realm, is when you start trying to unlock the mind of God, that's when you lose your mind.
Oh, yes.
Which makes sense as to why they say you have to have the mind of Christ. Because trying to understand Greek with your natural mind, the natural mind, you can't even comprehend.
You cannot.
It's too difficult to comprehend. So I had to learn how to stop overthinking and stop trying to unlock the mind of God and this and that. And I had to realize it doesn't negate the fact that I miss my mom, but I had to look at her life, her legacy, the things that she instilled in us, and how I'm able to carry her spirit. We have me and my mom, our personalities were different, but I still exude my mom's spirit. So for that, I'm thankful, because even though I miss her dearly, I can still carry on her teachings and her prolific teachings, her wisdom, and the different strategies that she put in us of how to be a wife, a mother, just things like that. So I'm grateful for that.
Yes. Now, a lot of people may not know this, but unless we know you personally, or you kind of tell your story, when people look at you in the now, sometimes we and to God be the glory, because a lot of times we have to go through and see in order to be that beacon of hope for others openly. So when you just sit here and you think about the impact that you've had on so many lives after your loss, just in this moment, to commend you, because I was in that moment where I needed the practical. Don't give me the spirit right now, because I'm full of the Holy Ghost. So I know, but no one, I didn't have that person to just give me the real, give me the raw, so I hate that you had to experience your tragedy, in that way, but still thank God that makes sense, because now you're able to impact the lives of so many people. You're able to help so many people who can't see past their spiritual realm.
Yes.
And oftentimes, like even now, I remember something that your dad, Apostle Eddie Wilson, Sr., he said to me years ago. He said, "Daughter," he said, "you can't be so spiritually minded that you're not earthly good." And although I understood, it was like when the tragedy came, I really had got the revelation of what he meant. Because you can God all day, you can speak in tongues, you can fast, you can pray. All of that is good.
Yes.
But when I lose my mama and I can't call her no more, when I lose my dad and I can't go to him anymore, when I lose a sibling, when I lose a spouse, just whatever tragedy it is, how do you get over it? You do not get over it.
You don't get over it.
You just have to find out, like you're doing again, commend you. Oh my goodness. Because you are literally impacting the lives of so many people from the impact that could have took you out of here. And so, just in that moment, just thanking God for that. Just thanking God for that. And then we'll just ask you to just give the people just a few coping strategies. How just kind of sharing with them how you would cope in the midst of tragedy.
I think coping is definitely according to one's individuality. However, it does begin with being honest with yourself. Being honest with yourself, because as I said, even with therapy, if you're not honest and if you're not willing to be completely vulnerable, then even your therapist can't even help you and give you strategies to navigate. So to actually just go back within your mind and say, okay, I have to lay it all out on the line. And then, of course, not trying to over spiritualize, grief and trauma and things like that. And there's going to be times when you actually have to sit with. I had to learn that too. You can't outwork grief. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you have an amazing work ethic. I don't care how much you love to travel. I don't care how in love you are. It's things like that. One thing about grief will literally sit and wait till you are done doing everything you're doing. And it's just like, okay, you ready for me now? So a lot of times there's going to be times where you have to actually sit with it. For me, I suppressed the loss of my mom for probably about, I'll say, a year and a half. And when it hit me like a ton of bricks. And also there's no manual for coping. The only thing is to be real with yourself. If you want to scream, scream. If you want to kick. If you want to cry. But in that, make sure that your environment is conducive to that. Because what happens is, when you're trying to cope and when you're becoming vulnerable and transparent, if you don't have a support system that understands loss, they're going to create a narrative that you're losing your mind. They're going to create a narrative that, this girl, Val, she's going crazy, girl. She's still, because grief is something that your credentials won't even allow you to understand.
Yes.
I don't care how many letters you have behind your name. I don't care how many plaques you have on the wall. You have a lot of people who are clinical. You have some therapists who are just clinical. They go straight by the book. And then you have people who have an emotional intelligence, or they have experienced it. So make sure your support system is conducive to your healing. And like I said, be completely honest. Be completely honest. It's okay to take your cape off and say, I'm drowning. I'm not okay. So I just, admonish everybody to, take your own personal path with it, but definitely be honest with yourself about, what it is that you're feeling.
Wow, that's so good. That's some really good advice. Really good advice. And if you apply it, again, like we've been talking about this whole segment, you're still going to go through it, but applying some of these methods that the woman of God has shared on today, it will kind of ease it a little bit. You're still going to go through it. It's always going to be there and be present, but coping with it in different methods, it helps. It helps. And so we're grateful for that. And although, we're talking about tragedy, it's just the triumphs of your life. It's how you have overcame what tried to overtake you. And, that's what we're thankful for. Listen, this has been good. This has been good. You all make sure you are following Miss Valisha Wilson on all social media platforms. Literally, she's a motivational speaker. Call her. Get her to the place where you are so you can hear what the Lord has put down on the inside of her to help his people. And so we'll just give you that moment if you just want to share how people can reach you and your handles where they can get.
So I am on the social media platforms. I'm on Facebook and I am on Instagram. You can follow me. You can locate me by my name. First name Valisha with a V. That's Valisha. Last name Wilson, Wilson. And if you are wanting to bring me in to, be a motivational speaker, to pour into, a group of people and just to speak life, you can also reach me for a booking at Valisha Wilson, 8 @gmail.com.
Great. Hope you all got that information. Today has been good. Today has been good. So thankful for you being here. We always love you. So glad for her to grace the stage of Wisdom Speaks. A lot of wisdom, you got to catch it. A lot of wisdom was displayed on today. I hope you all caught it. Listen, we are here every Wednesday at 5:30, 4:30 on Pioneer Television Network. To hear wisdom speak, it is a beautiful thing. To obey her is wise because wisdom, she surely speaks. You all have a blessed day.
But because I experienced it in the capacity that I did,